Hi, welcome to Fiberchats. My name is Irina. I'm the host here, and today my guest is a host of another YouTube channel, hand dyer and weaver, spinner, opera singer. We'll talk about all the things that you do and how you manage to do it all. Felicia Lo, welcome to my channel.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's nice to finally sit down and chat with you, Irina. Thank you.
Well, I was so happy that I got to see you in person at HH Americas. And actually, it's a funny story. The first time I've heard about you, I was strolling on Instagram and I saw this call for designers to submit their portfolio for the School of Sweet Georgia Yarns. And so I was like, what is that, right? So a few friends of mine were interested and they were submitting their designs and the portfolios and putting it together. And so that's how I started looking into you and the school. And the more I was looking into, the more sides of you I was discovering, basically. We'll come back to that because I want to talk about Ruth and her design and then eventually how I met you through Ruth. But let's talk about your journey. Like, how did it all start? When did you get interested in all things fiber?
Oh, I've been interested in all things fiber since I was a kid, since I was super, super little. I think one of my very first experiences was watching my mom sew her own dress. And the dress was hot pink. It was fabric that she had laid out on the floor in our living room. And she was cutting the fabric to sew a dress for herself. And I must have been like 5 or 6 years old at the time. And I just remember being really, really inspired by it because it was like, wow, you can make something from this other thing. Like you can make things. And so I very quickly was interested in sewing and constructing garments, constructing pieces. And I also around grade 4, grade 5, taught myself how to crochet, taught myself how to knit. I, sent away for this knitting instruction book. And basically it was black and white pamphlet and just kind of learned from the illustrations. This is how you cast on, this is how you knit. And I just found the whole thing really, really, really fascinating. I knit through high school. I sewed my own clothes through high school. And I remember going to sleep at bed, at nighttime, and thinking in my head how I would construct certain garments, like how I would sew things or how I would fit things together. Like my brain was just constantly thinking about making things and yarn and fabric. So it started a long time ago.
I find it interesting because I remember myself being in 3rd, 4th grade, and I used to correspond with the magazine back in Russia because I lived in rural Siberia, right? So the winters are long and cold. And I used to write to this magazine about how to properly grow your aquarium fish. And it's that curiosity that you want to learn something for yourself. My parents had zero interest in fish. It was purely my interest. And I find it interesting that you were the one who sent for that brochure to learn how to crochet and how to knit. Mm-hmm. Your mom was encouraging you to try different crafts, or was it totally your curiosity?
It was my curiosity. I didn't know that my mom knew how to knit until after I started knitting. So I started making things and started knitting, and I didn't have knitting needles at the time. So I had pickup sticks, that you would play. It was a toy. And I used pickup sticks and then, try to figure things out. And then only after that, my mom realized, oh, I'm interested in this. And then she pulled out knitting that she had done when we were kids. And so she'd started making little baby vests and she never finished it. There's just half done projects. And then her friends also knit and they started giving me their stash yarn, their leftover yarn. So I ended up with a stash of all this extra yarn, and I just processed it all, wound it all into balls, organized it, sorted it by color, sorted it by weight, sorted by texture. All of that stuff was so fun for me. Yeah. So she was encouraging, but she wasn't the one who's leading all of it.
Right. I remember you mentioned somewhere that you were thinking of becoming a designer, fashion designer and opera singer and some other things. tell me about your childhood. Like, what did you do and what were you passionate about?
So I grew up around art and around a lot of music. My dad is a painter. He's a painter and he's a printmaker. He does lithography. He does oil paintings of landscapes and things like that. So I always grew up surrounded by paints and canvases and art books and color and just all of that. And then my mom, she worked sometimes as a teacher, but she was also like very passionate about writing. And so I think that we all kind of came from this background where there was just a lot of arts surrounding us. Both my brothers and I, we all learned how to play string instruments. We all played piano. So there's just like a lot of that growing up. So I was interested in fabric, making things with yarn. I was doing a lot of sketching, a lot of drawing. I thought that maybe I wanted to do fashion design. I took a lot of sewing classes in high school. I also took a lot of music classes in high school. And so that's where like a lot of my interest in singing, I wanted to become a singer, but I just started too late. I started training too late, like just too many things were just too late. And so that wasn't really the right place for me to go, but I was interested in a lot of things. I was also interested in comp sci, like I was interested in computer science and programming and things like that. But you know, there's only so many things that you can do, and eventually you have to choose something. So,
how did you end up becoming a pharmacist then?
This is because I had so many interests, and so my parents were like, "Well, you know, you're so many interests, and you know, maybe what you should do is you should find like a really stable day job." And then you can come home and then do all of the crafts and all of the hobbies and all the things that you enjoy doing, like do them all for fun. And then just go and have this very stable day job that can support you. And so I was like, oh, okay, that's a good idea. I should do that. And then went to university and just like sitting in that classroom on the first day of pharmacy school and then realizing that, wow, like I am totally in the wrong place. This is definitely not the right place for me. But I feel like I was so young, and at that time I was just thought, oh, I've already, you know, worked so hard to get here. I shouldn't waste this time that I've this opportunity to come and learn at university. So I just continued the program. The whole program is 5 years. So I spent 5 years learning how to become a pharmacist, and then came out and then worked as a pharmacist for a little bit. And really tried to, you know, do this day job and then come home and then make the things that I wanted to make at the end of the day. But at the end of the day, I was so tired. I had no more energy to make things. So I was like, oh, this is not really working out the way I thought it was going to. So I just very, very gradually shifted into creative work. I had, in university, I had started a business, basically designing for people, designing websites, designing communications pieces for people, doing graphic design. And so I started to transition my work, working like 4 days as a pharmacist and 1 day as a designer, and then 3 days as a pharmacist and then 2 days as a designer. And I just kind of kept moving and shifting all of my work hours until I was working 1 day a week at the pharmacy. And then I asked my manager, like, oh, can I maybe just like work one shift every other week? And then at that point, they were like, you know what? Maybe you should just quit. And I was like, yeah, I think it's time.
Well, at that time also, you were thinking about starting a blog. How did that idea come to you?
Yeah, so I did work as a designer for many, many years. I did a lot of client work. And I think that the thing with doing work for clients is that you're helping solve their problems. You're looking at their business challenges and you're solving their problems. And the design part of it, the creative part of it, I feel like is very, very short. That creative phase, it's very compressed. You're figuring out the solution, and then everything after that is executing and then maintaining. And that's like, I guess my least favorite thing to do is maintain things. And so I feel like I wanted more time as a creative person. I wanted to do more creative things and spend more time doing the creative process. And that's where the blog came in, because I was like, oh, I can make websites. I can make a blog. I'll make my own. And then I can talk about and learn about and explore all of the creative things that I'm interested in exploring. And it just gave me a venue to share some of that stuff. It was especially because I had picked up knitting again after university. I started knitting, and I was so obsessed with it. But literally no one in my world knit. I didn't know anybody who knit. And so when I went on the internet, I saw other people are writing about this Rowan sweater pattern that I'm also making. That's cool. And so they were all showing their finished projects, and they were talking about the modifications that they'd made, or the yarn that they chose, or where they bought the yarn. And I was like, I can do that. And then by doing that, I felt like, oh, I can be part of this community where everybody's also talking about what they're knitting and sharing. And it just felt like then I would know other people who liked the things that I liked, and then it wouldn't feel so lonely.
But you didn't think in it about it like in terms of business, making it into a business.
No, not at all.
So how
Never. How did that happen? That was also very surprising. So I guess as part of writing about knitting and writing about yarn, and it started to get me on to this bit of a path where I was interested in yarn and how it was constructed. Where did it come from? How is it made? And then I stumbled on a bag of hand-dyed fiber and a spindle at like our local fair. It's like it's the P&E, it's the Pacific National Exhibition. So it's just every year for 2 weeks, there's this fair. And I stumbled on this bag of fiber and a spindle, and I read through the instructions. This is how you make yarn. You spin it on the spindle, you make one ply, and then you make another ply, and then you ply them together. And I was like, wow, that's so much work. Why would anybody do that? And so I left it. I didn't buy it. But then like for weeks and weeks and weeks, I just kept thinking about it, and I couldn't stop thinking about it because it triggered a bit of curiosity about, well, how does this work? How do you make it? What would it be like if I actually tried it? So I went and I found the local wool store. It doesn't exist anymore, but it's not there anymore. But I went and I bought myself like a little bag of fiber, and the fiber was all white, and I bought myself a spindle, and I went home and I tried to figure out how this all worked. And like within like a couple hours, I feel like I was hooked, and went back within the same week and I bought a spinning wheel. And so I bought like more fiber, but all the fiber at the store was white and it was all undyed. And I was like, oh, I don't know. I think it would be more fun to spin it if it had color on it. So then I learned how to dye. I learned how to dye by dyeing Kool-Aid on the fiber. And then became really, really interested in that, and then started learning how to dye with acid dyes to make stronger colors or different colors on the fiber. And this whole time I was like writing about it on the blog and sharing, oh, this is what I'm learning. This is what I did this weekend, and all of this kind of stuff. And then from learning to dye fiber, it's like, oh, you can dye yarn too. So then I started to dye yarn. And it was just sort of at that point in time where people were reading and they were providing so much encouragement. They were like, oh, that's so pretty. You know, are you selling it? Can I buy it? And I was like, no, it had never crossed my mind to sell it or anything. But I had just started to make so much of it that I could not keep it all. Like I wanted to dye more things. I wanted to try different things, and I couldn't keep dyeing more fiber without like getting it out of my house. So that's when I started to put things up on Etsy and sell things. And then just kind of like the business started from that point on.
One of your first episodes I was watching, and you said that when you look at the hand-dyed yarn, like that yarn has a heart, and it's like it's a live thing to you, and you can see all these variations. And you were also talking about that passion is basically a polite way to describe obsession. Do you feel like that's part of your personality, that you go into something out of curiosity that develops into passion that turns into obsession?
Maybe I just get very excited about things. I think it's just really being interested in the details of something, and then really, really wanting to dive deep into something. And it's always more fun to do that when you're surrounded by people who also have that same interest, so that you don't feel like you're talking to yourself all the time. I'm like, look at this, it's so exciting. This is so interesting. I want to look at this more. And if I'm the only person who's doing that, then it feels like I'm talking to myself. So it is nice to like be around other people who also have that same shared interest. And I feel like this wanting to learn more, being very curious about things, how things work, what things would look like if you put things together, like all of that is maybe where all this comes from. It's just being really interested in trying things and seeing things.
Well, as a curious person, it comes with the territory of you understanding that you don't know it all, right? Like the more you're learning something, the more you realize how much there is to learn. And yet, here you are with the School of Sweet Georgia. Tell me how that idea came to be. How did you decide to start that school? And did you have any hesitation about, like, what if I don't necessarily know what I'm talking about and what I'm trying to do?
Yeah, so the school started at the beginning because I had just finished writing a book. So I wrote a book called Dyeing to Spin and Knit. And this book was about dyeing fiber, dyeing yarn, and then you were going to use that to spin, knit a project, all of that kind of stuff. So there's patterns in there, there's dye techniques. And it was kind of like a book that I had wanted to write for a long time because, Sweet Georgia, we're making hand-dyed yarn and we've been making it for a long time. And I had a lot of information and a lot of things that I wanted to share about making hand-dyed color and sharing with people sort of like interest and passion around using color and being okay with color and not being scared of color, not being scared of combining color. So that's what this whole book was about. But the book came out basically at the same time as I had a newborn baby. And I was being invited to go and teach in all of these different places, like to travel and to go and teach workshops. And I couldn't, like I really tried. I even took my baby with me and my family and my in-laws. Like I took everybody and they all supported me so that I could try to teach workshops traveling while having babies. And it was just not really a good time to do that. And so I kept thinking, well, how else can I get this information out to people? And I remembered years and years ago, somebody had emailed me and said, can you just videotape yourself dyeing stuff and then like send it to me? And I was like, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to make a video. I don't know how to do that. But it just kind of triggered in me this thought that if I'm going to teach people and I can't travel anywhere to teach people, how can I get this information out to people? I can start to make videos about how I do things and then send that to people. And then realizing that other people also have trouble traveling to workshops and conventions and conferences and things like that to learn. And so if I'm working at a distance and you're working at a distance, then we can still learn and share information and learn new techniques. We don't have to necessarily be in the same place at the same time. And so this could be like a really efficient way to share knowledge and share passion and share my obsession. So that's kind of where the school started, that the idea of the school started. And then realizing that there's so many things that I'm interested in, right? It's not just dyeing, but it's dyeing and it's spinning and it's knitting and it's also weaving. And knowing that I don't know everything about everything. Part of this is that I'm learning and sharing. I'm learning and sharing. And part of what I can bring to people is my enthusiasm and my encouragement and just, like my excitement around these ideas and hopefully get other people excited about these ideas and get other people excited about learning new things. So I've always approached the school with this idea that learning is forever. Learning is continual. What I have learned this year, I'm going to build on that next year. And then we can all go back and like look at old content and then refresh, expand, build on that. It's good, like having a structure and a framework to begin and then building on that year after year after year. As my knowledge grows, as everyone else's knowledge grows, like we're all learning.
You mentioned that your family was very supportive of all your trials. Were your parents surprised when you went from pharmaceutical industry into designing, and from designing into the yarn dyeing? Were they supportive like along the way as well?
Yes. I don't think that they were surprised. I think they were worried. I think for sure they were worried. I think that the reason why they wanted their kids to have like stable careers is so that they wouldn't have to worry so much. But I think that they weren't necessarily surprised, because my dad made a similar change as well. So he has two master's degrees. They come from like university research academic backgrounds. He was doing anthropology, and archaeology, and he worked for the Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto. And so he had like this very, very good career, and he was writing articles, and he's been doing research, all this kind of stuff. Like all of it was really good, very academic. And then when he turned around 40, decided that he was going to finally become a painter. And he had been painting since like his whole life, but it had always just kind of been on the side and kind of deprioritized, I guess, in a lot of ways. And then kind of deciding around the age 40 that, no, this is what I'm going to focus on. This is my passion. This is what I'm going to do. And so that's what he's been doing for the past like 40 years now.
Well, were you nervous to stop doing the design, this web design, and go into full-time yarn dyeing business?
Yes, a little bit. But I kind of felt like it was the right thing for me to do. It was the right place for me. I felt very called to this work. Like, when you think about it, working in the fiber arts is very, very niche. It's very specialized stuff. When I go into a room of people, most people have no idea what it is that I do. They don't understand. And so that part of it, I think, is kind of challenging. It's a kind of a challenging place to work. So yeah, I think I was a little bit nervous. But at the same time, I felt very called to the work. So I felt like it was the right decision to make.
Well, when people ask you what you do and you try to explain to them, do they treat you like you are this, oh, my grandma used to knit as well kind of thing? Like, do they not take you seriously as a businesswoman?
I think it's changed over the years, actually. I think when I was much younger and I would be knitting, there would be more comments about like, oh, are you pregnant? Are you having a baby? Is that why you're knitting? Like, no, I'm knitting because it's fun and I like it. And when, trying to explain to people that I have like a hand-dyed yarn business and that we make knitting yarn, people are like, oh, that's interesting. But then when I kind of explain that, like, oh, we also have an online school and we teach people, and it's kind of like a Netflix style subscription. So you join and you have access to everything. You can see everything. I think immediately they understand what that is. And so that's been a lot easier because people are like, oh, okay, I get what you do.
Well,
and so that's nice.
Let's give this elevator speech to my viewers in case somebody doesn't know about what you do exactly. Tell them in your own words about the school and about your business.
So Sweet Georgia Yarns is a business that I started in 2005, and we make hand-dyed knitting yarn and spinning fiber. We have it's like over 100 colorways right now. We make everything from sock yarn. We have a yarn called Tough Love Sock, so sock knitting yarn, DK weight yarn, worsted weight yarn, lace yarn, silk yarn. We have cashmere. So we do a lot of luxury fiber blends, and they're all hand-dyed colors. The spinning fiber, we really encourage people to learn how to spin because, it helps you with your knitting. It helps with all of the fiber arts and understanding fiber and yarn and texture and all this kind of stuff. So those are the things that we make for Sweet Georgia for the yarn company. And then in 2017, we started an online school. And so the online school is a membership-based subscription where you can join, and then you're joining either monthly or quarterly or annually, that sort of thing. And then once you have a membership, you can jump in and watch any of the courses that we've made. And so a lot of these courses are not just by me, not taught by me, but we have like a group of instructors, and probably about 20 instructors who teach everything from knitting and spinning, crochet, dyeing. We have natural dyeing, we have weaving, we have rigid heddle weaving. And so working with a lot of artisans and makers who are very, very skilled at what they do. They're experts in what technique they're teaching. And we've basically been working on this since 2017, creating all these courses. And then we also have an online community that goes with the courses. So this gives you the opportunity to meet other people who also like the same things that you do, same kind of interests, and to kind of grow this community. Our thing really is about encouraging this idea of being a multi-craftual maker. So I really believe that there's like a spectrum of crafts, and people kind of will discover these crafts as they go along. And so you might see like crochet might be a gateway for you, or knitting might be a gateway for you. But then once you learn about knitting or crochet, then you think about yarn. Where does yarn come from? Then you start to think about spinning. Then you have so much yarn. What are you going to do with it? You can weave it, because you can use yarn faster if you weave it. And I feel like over time, I have observed people sort of evolve from being like 100% knitter to adding more and more and more crafts. And so we become multi-craftual over time. You like yarn, you like fiber, you like texture, you like all of these things. You're eventually going to discover a lot of these other crafts. And so I think the challenge that we try to help people with is trying to juggle all those different crafts. Like, you want to do all the things. How can you do all the things? You only have so much time. So that's a little bit about where the struggle is and how we can try to help.
How do you personally deal with that struggle? Because you do all of those things. You run the business, you have little kids, you knit, you weave, you crank the socks on the machines. Like, I mean, I'm seeing like every single time I look at your video, there is something else you're doing. You also break bread. So like there are other interests besides just fiber arts. How do you manage to juggle all these balls? How do you not stressing from it?
I think that I heard a long time ago, like you can do all the things, but you just can't do them all at the same time. And I think that I'm okay with that. So that's why I talk about this idea of seasons of craft, of doing things seasonally. So just because I'm a spinner and I spin yarn, I don't feel compelled to, or like I'm forced to spin every single day of the year. So I have certain months or certain seasons where I do spin every day or every evening, spin 10 minutes here and there, whatever, for a couple months. And then that kind of like goes away. And then I might spend another couple of months really, really focused on weaving. So I don't feel like people, or I try not to put the pressure on myself to be like, I'm going to knit and spin and weave and dye and crochet and do all the things all at the exact same time, because there's only so many hours and you only have so many hands. You're busy doing this, you can't do that. So I think it's okay to enjoy all of the crafts and enjoy them in phases. You know, I'm going to spin some yarn this summer, and then in the fall, I'm going to weave with that yarn that I made, or I'm going to knit with it. And then when it's cold in the winter, then I'm going to spend all the time in my attic and I'm going to weave. And then in the springtime, maybe I'm like out and about and doing more things and need to be portable. So maybe then I'm going to knit. I'm going to carry a knitting project with me. So that's basically how I juggle all of the things that I have been trying to do.
Well, one of the videos I was recently watching, and I told you before we started this conversation that I binge watch your channel for a few weeks now. So one of them was about this advent calendar that you guys were putting together a few years ago, and how many people were involved in just putting these little packages together and then making it into the boxes and shipping it and the whole thing. And you took one box and you were like, I don't know, maybe I'm going to be like everybody else and actually need the pattern that was just, designed for this specific advent. Do you find it difficult, like when events like this happen, when there is like a knit along or something that your company organizes, that you want to do, but you don't have time to do everything again? Like, do you find it difficult to stop yourself and say, well, maybe not this time?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is challenging to not be able to do all of the things. Um, for sure. Yeah, sometimes I think that that makes me a little bit sad, but I also feel really lucky. Like we have this amazing team here, and there are lots of knitters and crocheters and spinners and weavers on this team. And so if I don't make it, I almost like live vicariously through someone who's made it. And I'm like, go, that's awesome. I'm like so happy for you that you made it. And it's just as enjoyable in a lot of ways. I think, like we get a lot of our enjoyment in fiber arts from making every single stitch or like spinning every inch of yarn. Like we're getting that enjoyment because we are hands on with that craft. My joy in making things is in that moment of touching the materials, playing with the stuff. My joy has never really been in the finished object. Like once it's made, sometimes they go into my closet and I don't even wear them because that's kind of not the point. So I've never been really obsessed with the final product. So not making the Advent shawl at the end of the day is not that really a big deal for me. I think that the fun of it is in figuring out what you're going to make with it, in casting on and doing the stitches and doing all of that. So the process part of it is what I find fun.
Well, being a dyer has this advantage of you can always just jump to the pot and like dye something for yourself, right? However, you often mention your stash and how like you're trying to use your stash and how much stuff you have in your stash. Let's talk about that stash. How did it accumulate and why do you have a need for stash?
So my stash is basically like a lot of stuff that I dyed and then didn't want to sell. Like a lot of what we are doing at Sweet Georgia is trying to make very, very consistent yarn because part of it is like, I want for the end user, like the knitter at the end of the day, to be able to have skeins that, you can use and don't have like huge color difference between multiple skeins and things like that. So I dyed a lot of things in the past many years that are kind of like one-off or pot of this or pot of that. And so there's like 2 skeins of this or 1 skein of that. So these are not things that I can reproduce or effectively give to people and say, oh, yes, if you need another skein, I can make that for you. So my stash is just full of like these single one-off random things. And it's kind of a tricky place to be because then, we're making things. I want to make things also where you can look at it and be like, oh, I want to make that too. What color did you use? I'm like, oh, well, I used this random thing that I dyed from my stash. So my stash kind of like sits there because I made it all. It all looks really good, but I can't really use it. And so it's kind of a bit of a struggle. So what I end up doing is almost every year I clean my stash and I sort it and I go through all of it. And then I like give it all to Charlotte. I give like batches and batches of it to Charlotte, who works here on the team, and she knits hats for charity and then she gives all the hats away. And so I have no problem with giving yarn to Charlotte or anybody else who wants to knit hats for charity or do that kind of thing, because I feel like that's a really good way to use these beautiful and very unique skeins that are in my stash.
Let's talk about your team. How, like you mentioned that when we were knitting, you didn't really know any other knitters. How did you find your team? How did it grow over the years? And what role do they play right now in your life?
Yeah, so I started bringing people on and kind of building a team because I realized very early on that I could not do all of this myself. Like dyeing yarn is very, very labor intensive. It's very labor intensive. It's very time consuming. And even after you've dyed the yarn, you still have to wring it out, hang it up to dry. Once it's dry, then you're twisting it, you're labeling it, you're packaging it. Like there's a lot of work that goes into making this yarn. And I realized that like if I was doing it all myself, I wouldn't be able to do things like, set up the website or enter orders. Like when I was working on all of this by myself, there'd be full on days where I would be entering all of the orders and to what to make. And then like one day where I would dye all the things, or one weekend where I would dye all the things. And then I would spend another 3 days packaging things. Like it was just so much work. So near the beginning, I started to bring on people to help me with packaging, labeling, doing a lot of those kinds of things, and then gradually added more and more team members. And then I went away on my honeymoon. And when I was away on my honeymoon, we've gone for maybe like 2 weeks or something like that. And when I came back, I realized, oh, no yarn had been dyed in the time that I'd gone on my honeymoon, because I'm the only person who dyes. And so I realized at that point that like I can never not be here unless I teach someone else how to dye. And so that's at that point when I started to teach the people on my team how to also dye yarn. And then we're able to do so many more things collectively because we have more people involved in the whole process. But very like initially, like Teresa, who's been here probably the longest, she's like, was like a family friend. She was like a friend of my husband's, and we spent a lot of time together. And she was like, "Oh, I can come and help out," and all this kind of stuff. So it kind of like came from friends, and then friends and family, and then community. There's like a lot of people who are working on our team who were customers, who were like just members of our community who were interested. So yeah, it's been a long time growing this team. It's probably since about 2009, 2010. Yeah, but they're awesome. They're a fantastic group of people.
So what do you personally do nowadays? What's your responsibilities?
I think very much my responsibility is doing a lot of the things that I did at the very beginning, which is like learning things, sharing things, getting excited about things, helping other people get excited about things, really like trying to spread the word about how fun and how cool it is to make things with our hands, and how important it is to sort of make time to make things. Like this is the message that we're trying to share with everybody. And the goal is really to just try to help bring more joy to people's lives, right? We are doing this because we have a lot of color. We can make color. We're doing crafts. We're doing these processes, which are fun, which are relaxing, which are somewhat meditative. Like all of these kinds of things can enhance your life. And so my goal is really just to do the work of spreading the word, getting people into this interest that we're all in.
Well, I mentioned to you at the beginning that one of the first times I've heard about you was when you posted that call for designers, and Ruth Nguyen, she was one of the designers that you chosen, and you were working with her. I think it was for a year, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I actually just recently did the knit along with Ruth, and I knitted that shawl out of your yarn. And then when I knew that you're coming to H&H, I was like, you know what, I'm going to gift it to Felicia. So that's how we met at H&H. But tell me about working with designers, and like, why did you decide to do something like that? And why would you want to support young designers, unknown designers? Because a lot of people who provide yarn support, they want to go for known names to sort of ride on that wave of popularity. Why was it important for you to support young designers?
I think because young designers are the people who bring a lot of interest into what we do, right? It's these project ideas, and it's pattern ideas, and it's those kinds of things that spark people's imagination, and like, oh, I want to make that. Because all day long, I can be like, look at this amazing color. It's so pretty. But that is not necessarily going to translate into, oh, I'm going to go make something, right? It's like, look at this beautiful picture. Look at this beautiful color. It's different when you're presenting like, look at this amazing shawl, because that shawl design is going to make somebody feel like, oh, I want to make that shawl, right? And so that's where I feel like it's so important to support designers and innovation, new ideas. Like when I was learning to knit, I got all of my knitting books from the library. That's where my patterns came from. This is all pre-Ravelry time, right? They came from books. They came from Rowan magazine. They came from Vogue Knitting magazine. Like this is where pattern inspiration came from. And then with Ravelry, there's like a huge influx of pattern designers or knitwear designers. And I think that what we really wanted at the time was to help provide a lot of these designers with more skills in terms of like, how do you write a pattern? How do you get it tech edited? How do you get photos taken? How do you get the word out? Because it's not just designing the patterns, but it's also like, how do you market, or how do you find people who will knit your patterns? How do you do test knitting? How do you conduct all these things? And so helping people with that, I think was a good thing. So that way we could just get more patterns in this world that we're in, that were produced really well, right? Like you have a great idea. How do you execute, and how do you make that something that someone else wants to make?
And I find it also like a lot of people don't pay attention to like who is testing it and how do you market it. But like a lot of times I notice when somebody else is knitting your design, they can come up with like color combination that you wouldn't even think about and make it like, and people would connect with that version and not your original version of the design. So it's the same with this shawl that I gifted you, right? Ruth's shawl was in one color, and I saw the kit that you put together, and I was like, I want to make it in all of those colors. I don't want to choose just one. And so it's like it creates completely different look for the same shawl. So sometimes it's like it's interesting how people choose to play with colors.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just talking about that this morning, like how we have one shawl pattern that is made with 3 different colors. And originally in our photos and our samples that we made, it was all kind of like a mossy olive green. All 3 colors were very similar. And so overall, the shawl looks like mostly texture, right? Like you're looking at lace, you're looking at garter stitch, you're looking mostly at texture. And then another version of this pattern was knit by one of our School of Sweet Georgia members. And she chose colors that were like highly contrasting, color blocking kind of things, like very high contrast colors, creates a completely different effect. Looks totally different. Same pattern, just choosing different colors makes it completely different. So it's that part of it that I think is really, really fun to be able to explore.
Right. Well, when I interviewed Rowan last year, and I did the whole series on all things Rowan. And if you guys want to watch that, it's in the playlist, Rowan playlist. So they were relying really heavily on research about what colors are going to be popular. And it was like fashion-based research. And they would look into like what the predictions are for the most popular colors for next season, right? How do you decide what colors to add to your palette? How do you draw inspiration for new colors?
I think that overall, we're trying to create like a really comprehensive, cohesive palette of colors. So very early on when we were making colors, we would create a bunch of colors. We love these colors. This is really fun. I love this. I love this. Love this. And we were just keeping all these colors and formulas because we thought they were really pretty and we loved them. And then got to the point where sometimes when I was trying to make color work projects, I found it a little bit challenging to mix colors together because I'm like, oh, this color doesn't exactly go. I wish it was a little bit this, a little bit that, or whatever. And so a couple of years ago, we sort of started creating this color system, which is the idea that this whole palette of colors comes from the same root colors that get mixed together. So the whole palette expands out of these primary colors that we decided to choose. And the goal with all of that is to create like all these colors that are really, really work perfectly well together. So because they all came from the same parents, then you can mix and combine all these colors in all different ways and they all go together. And so that's basically what we've been doing. We also look at color research and things like that. And, like a number of years ago, I attended this talk where they were talking about what was going to be really popular, and the person was saying that there was going to be a phase where we were all going to love nude and beige like for a long, long time. And I was like, oh, really? That seems weird. Like, why are we going to do that? But it's totally happened. It's been like 10 years of this millennium pink and this beigey rose gold kind, that all of those colors they predicted and have lasted for so long. And we made a rose gold colorway that's like one of our very popular colorways as well. And yeah, I think we do a little bit of both. We're looking at, what colors are going to be popular, but then we're also really putting our own spin on things.
Well, are there any colors that like you absolutely hate, but you have to do it just because people asking for it?
No, I love them all.
Is there like a favorite? Like, is it like
It's like the opposite. It's like there's colors that I love, and I'm like trying to convince everybody, you should all knit yellow. Like you should all knit this olive green. There's colors that I love, and trying to share my enthusiasm for those colors with everyone.
Let's talk about your YouTube channel. Why did you decide to start YouTube channel? And is it easy for you to ask for support for whether it's like for people to sign up for the school or for Patreon or even hit that like button?
Yeah. So I started the YouTube channel. I had signed up for YouTube like years ago and then never posted anything. And it just kind of like it was an account. It was a holding place. I had posted nothing. And then I started to post videos around 2017. And it was because I was going to start the school and I didn't know how to make videos and I had to learn how. So making YouTube videos was my way of practicing. How am I going to talk to camera? How do I organize stuff? How do I edit? How do I film? How do I do lighting? How do we do audio? Like everything. And so learning how to make YouTube videos is what was the foundation for learning how to make the videos that we put into the school. So over time, hopefully, the quality is improved, production value is improved, and I'm constantly learning. It's one of my other like interests. I'm interested in a lot of things like sourdough baking, but I'm also really, really interested in photography and video. And so I spend a lot of my time learning about those kinds of things. Yeah. And I think that it's been nice because in the beginning, when I started the blog, a lot of the engagement with other people in this community was over blog comments. People would leave comments, we would talk to each other in the comments, and that was great. But then that kind of died after Ravelry and social media, and just the conversation moved elsewhere. However, I find that the conversation on YouTube is very active.
Right.
Lots of people post very in-depth comments and have questions, and you can have conversations with people in the comments of a YouTube video. And so I feel like that's where a lot of engagement's happening. That's where a lot of conversations happening. That's where you meet people. That's where you learn about people over, video from video. They watch over and over like every video, and then they'll comment on every video. And so that is really neat because it's almost like those early days of blogging and being able to meet other people in the community through these comments.
Does that support surprises you? Because like for me, it's like every time I see another comment, I'm just blown away and I'm like totally surprised that somebody would spend time and effort to like put something in writing and like tell me what they think about the interview or what I said or what's been said on this podcast. Like, are you still surprised by people engaging in it?
Yeah, I love it. It's fantastic. I'm always blown away when people leave comments. It feels very special. And then like, I know even like for myself, if I've left a comment for another YouTuber and they just like give it a heart or something like that, I feel so special. I feel like, oh my gosh, they noticed me. And so I think that it's nice. Like if you can spread that feeling, and I feel it when I leave other people comments. So I'm really just thankful when people leave me comments too.
Do people ever leave negative comments? Do you ever feel being criticized for something you do or something?
Occasionally, not too much. I think I've been lucky in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Tell me about how does it feel like when you go to public events like HH or any like festivals where you sell and you being recognized because you're on YouTube and because you are the owner of the store of this company. How does it feel? Like, are you surprised that people know you?
Yeah, I'm still surprised when I hear that people are watching the videos and everything like that, because sometimes you don't realize how many people are watching. Like, I make videos here in this office and then also like in my attic at home. And for the most part, I am talking to myself, right? Like, I'm talking to myself about things that I think are really cool and interesting. And so it's neat to hear, like, when people come up to me, either like Knit City or they've come to the studio or I've, gone to H&H, and they'll say, oh, I saw that video where you did this thing. And it feels great because it feels like a moment where we're connecting about something that we both have this shared common interest in, right? So people come up to me and talk about the CSM, the sock knitting machine, and that's exciting because I'm like, oh, I've met somebody else who knits on a sock knitting machine and they know what I'm talking about. So that part of it, yeah, is great.
I find like when I was watching your videos, like sometimes you do talk to yourself. You throw out ideas like, oh, should I use these two colors or these two colors? Well, I guess I'm gonna use like I was thinking that you were leading to telling people to put in their choices in the comments, but you were actually talking to yourself and trying to make that decision. Do you have like somebody in mind when you turn that camera on? Do you think of us who is on the other side of that screen, or do you just truly like just decide to talk about something and you talk like nobody's listening?
No, I think that like over time, I've sort of developed a bit of a thing where, yeah, I think that there's a number of members that I think about in the school of Sweet Georgia, that have come to like sort of get to know over time. And I feel like I'm talking to them, like in particular, and like sharing ideas that I have that I think that they might find interesting. And so, yeah, I feel like, like there's one of our moderators in the school is Robin, and Robin has like very much become this multi-craftual, like explored all of this multi-craftual stuff that we've been talking about, right? She's knitting and she crocheted. And when she came to the school, she was initially like very involved in knitting. And then gradually over time, she learned how to spin. And then she got herself an e-spinner. And then she got herself a table loom. And then she just like last week got herself her first floor loom. And so just watching her explore all of these different crafts and then like get exposed to more and more and more and more, and do it also with a lot of enthusiasm, I think it is exactly the person that I'm kind of talking to.
Well, one of the people I interviewed was an Australian weaver, Michelle Driver, and she had a video on YouTube. She has her own YouTube channel, and one of the videos was that every artist should have a YouTube channel. And her explanation for that was that if the more of us show our work, the more we excite others and the more we encourage others to try different techniques and different things, the better the world will become. And then there is like a school of thought that like YouTube is oversaturated and there is way too many dyers, way too many designers, and the competition is too tough, and like everything has been done already, like, and you shouldn't start another YouTube channel, is going to get lost. What's your thought?
I don't think it's oversaturated at all. And I think it's because I watch so many like photography channels. There's so many more photography channels than fiber arts channels. And so when I go onto YouTube and I'm like searching for weaving, there's not that many people weaving on YouTube. And I feel like I try to explore and find all of the content that is on YouTube about weaving or about spinning or about knitting. Like there's some, but it's not like overwhelming like it is in photo and video stuff on YouTube, or, even gaming stuff or anything that's any other niche that's on YouTube. I feel like our niche still has so much to explore, and so many voices should speak up and share the things that they're interested in. Because I feel like if there was more people sharing the things that they're doing and that they're interested in, or the things that they're making, there's just more inspiration going around. And I've always believed in this idea of like building a bigger pie. If we can get more people interested in knitting, more people interested in spinning and weaving, like this whole community grows bigger and we all learn more from each other. So I don't ever feel like, oh, I should be the only one who's doing these things. And, I really would love to see more people come out and make videos about weaving or spinning or for any of these things.
It's funny because like when I first started, one of the first people I interviewed was Suzanne Bryan, and Suzanne has a huge channel. She has like over 100,000 subscribers on YouTube, and she's showing like all the techniques and like little knitting tutorials. And she also used to do like some interviews here and there. And I remember she was asking me, aren't you afraid you're going to run out of people to interview? And the longer I'm doing it, the more I feel like I haven't even scratched the surface. And I'm finding like new amazing fiber artists, because this world is just full of talent. And interestingly enough, I just came from knitting retreat in Italy, and I ran into Fruity Knitting there, and also interviews. And we had this discussion, Andrea and I said, it's interestingly, like, I don't feel like we are competition, because if people listen to your interview and then they go to my channel and they listen to my interview of the same person, they're just going to learn more about that person. It's not going to be repetitive. It's not going to be the same information. And so, guys, if you're thinking about joining YouTube and starting your own YouTube channel, go for it.
I totally agree. Yeah.
We'll watch and we'll like and we'll subscribe and we'll leave a comment under your video. Well, I'm so happy that we got to connect and I got to see you in person and we got to chat today and I got to know you a little bit better. I hope we're going to see each other at other festivals, and I hope you're going to wear that shawl is going to keep you warm and beautiful.
Yes, thank you.
For a long time. Thank you so much. Thank you for being my guest today.
Thank you so much for the chat, Irina. It was really, really nice to be here. Thank you.